Varmt välkomna till Välmåendepodden. Jag heter Julia.
Och jag heter Kim. Vi hade ju Andrew Soren som är en av de styrelseledamöterna för IPPA, Internationella associationen för positiv psykologi, i förra avsnittet, och vi har honom igen. Våran intervju fortsätter.
Yeah, and you are the founder of Eudaimonic by Design. What are you working with there? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, eudaimonia, it's the ancient Greek word for everything that I've just been describing. This sense of eudaimonia as a sense of well-being that is deeply anchored in meaning and purpose, but also mastery, sense of excellence and ethics. When ultimately we try to bring the very best of ourselves to accomplish hard and good goals, important virtuous work. When we do that, and we do it every day, that's ultimately what is considered a life well lived by many people, especially looking backwards. And so positive psychology as a field studies this eudaimonic orientation in many, many ways. It's the thing that has always appealed to me about positive psychology. And the idea of eudaimonic by design is that it would be amazing if work offered us an opportunity to really exercise that eudaimonic muscle that we all have. Probably not everybody wants that, but definitely some people do. And in some organizations, especially organizations that are really here because of some sort of social purpose, or because they have a mission and an orientation that's really trying to do good work in the world, they want their employees to feel that kind of eudaimonic pull. So what Eudaimonic by Design tries to do is figure out what are the conditions that would allow an individual to feel that kind of sense of being able to bring the best of themselves to do important work. What kind of culture is required? What kind of leadership conditions are necessary? What kind of fundamental systems need to change in terms of how we hire people, or how we recognize people, potentially even how we fire people when it comes to that kind of an organization? So that's what Eudaimonic by Design tries to do.
That's really interesting. Could that be one of the reasons why well-being is going down in Western countries among young people, because of the social media? You know, they are looking for the hedonic lifestyles, you know, seeing other people having vacation and nice dinners and so on, and just hunting for that, and not finding the eudaimonic side of themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, you talked about that other word. You used the word hedonic. So hedonic and eudaimonic are often played against one another. And if you were really oversimplifying, you could say that hedonia or hedonic is really about an orientation towards pleasure. You know, what will give me the maximum amount of pleasure in this particular moment? And a eudaimonic orientation is much more about purpose or meaning. What will give me the maximum amount of purpose in the context of the work that I do? And it's interesting to be able to explore this question of, you know, how are those orientations affecting different people, even at different points across a lifespan. And I think that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of opinion survey, there is some degree of research that would say that younger generations, recent generations, whether we're talking about millennials or Gen Zs now, where there's, you know, a frustration around not necessarily being able to have as much meaning as folks might want. There's, I think, the people who actually study the lifespan, and they would say that's probably not necessarily just about this generation. That's probably more about what it means to be in our late teens and our early 20s. that there are different kinds of orientations over the course of a lifespan that kind of look like a U-shaped curve. So, when we're teenagers, when we're getting into our young adulthood, we do have a desire for more meaning and purpose generally. We're on the hunt for a job that's going to give us meaning. We're looking for university or education that's going to give us a sense of purpose. We care about the climate. We have activist orientations. We want to make a difference in the world in some way. And then often what happens is other priorities come along. Maybe we get into relationships. Maybe we get married. Maybe we start to have kids. Maybe money starts actually to become more important. Maybe having a house, maybe saving for the universities of our children. All of those kinds of orientations start to, and motivations start to take over. And we see that kind of eudaimonic intention often drop in middle age to its lowest. And of course, these numbers vary in lots of different ways. They vary against gender, they vary against location in the world, but they're pretty consistent in that U shape. And then generally, as we approach retirement and start to enter into the third act of our lives, we start to see those numbers, those eudaimonic orientation numbers start to raise again. And suddenly we start thinking, what else are we doing with our lives at this age and stage? And what kind of legacy do we want to potentially leave? And suddenly those eudaimonic intentions start to rise again. So I think that is all, interesting things to try to think about in terms of the different generational shifts. But I'll also say in terms of drops of well-being numbers, that I think that COVID in the last few years, especially in a North American context, and I know this is probably a little different in Sweden, but it's had a massive impact on people's well-being. And a lot of that has to do with, frankly, a loneliness epidemic, the lack of social connection, a feeling just disassociated with so much that's happening in the world. There's massive psychosocial impacts that the last few years have had on all of us, which I think are going to have a very long tail of repercussion, and quite frankly that we don't know an enormous amount, especially for younger generations who had to have their late teens or mid-teens, a very important time to be social in our lives from a human development perspective, pretty isolated and unable to connect, or very connected in a digital way. I think all of those things we're going to see long-term repercussions around.
Yeah, and there's so many different things that are affecting our well-being. What would you say is the most important findings in positive psychology that can tell us about what we can do for our well-being?
There used to one of the other fathers of the field. There are mothers of the field too of positive psychology, but I'm talking a lot about the guys right now. There was a man named Chris Peterson who, in the early days of positive psychology, said that if you really wanted to reduce all of this immense amount of research into one single takeaway about well-being, it would be that when it comes to our well-being, other people really matter. That well-being is a team sport as opposed to an individual sport. That we need social support in our lives for our resilience, to manage against stress, to just make sure that we're having a life that is rich and filled with joy and gratitude and possibility, that other people give us meaning, other people give us a sense of accomplishment, other people help us feel engaged in different kinds of ways. And so I would say that that finding is still very much true, and at least in the U.S., the current Attorney General is Vivek Murthy is very much known for being able to say that there is a loneliness epidemic, and that we all need to try to find ways. Loneliness at this point has almost a bigger impact on people's health than smoking or obesity, and so I think that all of these ways in which positive psychology knows about how to build social connection, social support, high quality connections, all of those things can have a tremendous amount of impact on our well-being.
People who are coming to Vancouver to World Congress of Positive Psychology, What should they expect?
A full-on 4 days. That's what I'd say. So as I said before, it is 130 or 140 hours of content. It's 590 presenters. There's a huge range from everything from a quick poster to 3-hour workshops. There are some of the biggest names in positive psychology who will be there presenting about what the latest and most innovative work is in both the research and the application of positive psychology in a wide variety of fields. But even more importantly, I would say that coming to positive psychology is actually about the other people who are going to be there, coming to the IPA World Congress. That this is an opportunity to connect with like-minded people. You said before that in Sweden, there aren't that many people who know about positive psychology or are thinking about it. I think it's true all around the world. Those of us who deeply care about these topics can feel isolated and alone. And the IPA World Congress is an opportunity to meet with a world of other people who care about these things, who want to be able to come together and learn together, grow together, build community together. So yes, there's extraordinary content. You will build your mastery. You'll learn all sorts of things, but you'll also walk away feeling connected, feeling like you have a community of people, feeling like you are not alone in this work and in this mission that we all have to bring well-being to the masses.
That's amazing. And it's such a privilege to meet all these researchers in the field and all experts. So that's amazing, and to build this connection. So there's so many people in Sweden doesn't know about positive psychology, and sometimes when I talk about positive psychology, I get a comment that it doesn't exist or it's not research or something like this. So what are your experience about misunderstandings about positive psychology?
Yeah, I think a lot of people confuse positive psychology with positive thinking. Just if you think happy thoughts, everything is going to be okay. Or people confuse positive psychology with self-help and all sorts of gurus who proffer wisdom about what they think will ultimately help us lead to a life well lived. And I think that what positive psychology is trying to do is to rigorously study those things and exactly address those questions that people who are critical of this field have by saying, what if those claims is actually true? And how can we use the most rigorous scientific methods to be able to actually study those things in laboratory settings, in the real world, in gold standard evidence-based ways, to be able to know which of those things is actually true and which of those is not. I think that that's what positive psychology is actually here to do. And so, at the World Congress and at IPA more generally, we have a tremendous focus on the science. And the reality is that in the social sciences, and specifically in social psychology, there's been a lot of debate about the science that has been put out there in the world around these things, and about whether it's false claims or weak research, what actually is true and what's not. And I think that the wonderful thing about science is that science is always evolving. A claim that we thought was true 15 years ago might be disproved, and that's great from a science perspective. We want to know that those things may or may not be true, and to push the research agenda more and more and create even better, more rigorous, more longitudinal, more impressive studies that help us actually decipher what is true and what's not. All of those things will be things that we will be actively talking about at the World Congress, including even how to talk about these topics in ways that have integrity, in ways that make sure we don't oversimplify I think that a lot of people struggle between this tension between not believing that the science is rigorous, but then also wanting a silver bullet, or just give me the 3 simple steps that I need to be happy or to have well-being. And those two things are at odds with one another. Any good scientist knows that things are always more complex than any silver bullet can solve. And so I think part of the tension here is how we balance those competing needs.
Thank you so much. So interesting. Thank you to visiting us, Andrew Soren. We are really happy to have you here in our well-being podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Och där fick vi lyssna på andra delen av intervju med Andrew. Och det som är intressant är ju det här han tar upp om eudaimonia och hedonism och vad man kan göra för att stärka sin eudaimonia.
Exakt, så det handlar inte bara om de upplevelserna för stunden som gör oss lyckligare, utan även det som är mer meningsfullt, och hitta det meningsfulla både i arbetet och privatlivet.
Precis. Och positiv psykologi, det är ju ett väldigt stort och brett ämne och kan anpassas till många olika delar i livet, till organisationer, till samhällen, till individen. Och i Sverige så kommer det ju upp ibland en del kritik om positiv psykologi. Men den här kritiken är väl främst från personer som inte har sett vetenskapen bakom och kanske inte uppmärksammat att det handlar om gedigen forskning. Och sen är det ju tyvärr så att det finns några i Sverige som kanske erbjuder privata utbildningar inom positiv psykologi, säger de. Men om man kikar på innehållet så är det inte så mycket positiv psykologi, utan det kanske är mer någon typ av livsfilosofi. Och det här gör ju såklart att det blir svårt att nå ut med positiv psykologi och själva vetenskapen, för det är svårt att navigera i det här. Så om du som lyssnar är intresserad av att faktiskt lära dig mer, så kan jag absolut rekommendera att studera via universitet. Det finns olika kurser inom det här ämnet. Eller kolla vem är det som står bakom den här utbildningen. Är det någon som själv har utbildats inom positiv psykologi och har koll på vetenskapen. Och så vill jag att ni ska hålla utkik, för kanske är det så att vi inom en snar framtid kommer erbjuda utbildning och kurser inom det här ämnet.
Och det kommer vi att göra, det kan vi ju lova. Och följ oss på sociala medier, också via vår hemsida leadershippower.se. Och också är vi väldigt tacksamma och glada när du hör av dig med dina insikter, dina frågor och dina tips.
Verkligen, det tar vi tacksamt emot. Så det är bara att skriva till oss på sociala medier. Vi finns även på LinkedIn, Julia Karho och Kim Karho.
Vi hörs snart igen. Ha det så gott.